Greetings to all the amazing people watching and listening to this. Welcome to CHEZUBA Talks, a podcast dedicated to sharing compelling stories of hope, determination, and humanity. Visions Services for the Blind and Visually Impaired is a non-profit rehabilitation and social service organization that celebrated its 95th anniversary last year, and the 6th year as number one in job placements of legally blind New Yorkers. Hello, I'm Tej, and with me today is extremely humble and noble CEO, Nancy Miller. Nancy, an absolute privilege to be able to talk to you about your amazing organization.
Thank you so much for the invitation.
Nancy, coping with vision loss can be very difficult. The challenges it poses can seem overwhelming, not only to the person, but also the family members. Could you tell us what your organization is doing?
Sure. So vision loss is something that people fear, even sometimes more than other health conditions.
True.
And so the first thing we need to do is to get people to accept our services. We start with counseling, adjusting to their vision loss, and really helping people understand how they're going to live their life differently using non-visual techniques, and that they can do anything they set their mind to. That vision loss is something that you can adjust to, that you can manage, that you can learn to adapt to, and still do everything that you want to do, whether it's an avocation like mountain climbing, even being able to drive a car now with all of the technology that's available is something that blind people will be able to do. Fly a plane. The technology allows people who are blind to fly. But even just daily activities, making your own breakfast, managing your own personal hygiene, being able to take care of your home, do childcare, take care of the baby. Blind people do this every single day, and we teach them the techniques that they can use in order to be able to do these things independently without the assistance of a sighted person. We also want people to understand that when they first get a diagnosis, it can be overwhelming. People often feel angry and depressed. They may feel that life is over. Well, we are here to tell them that that is not the case, that these are normal reactions to getting a diagnosis, and we will help them all the steps on their journey to be able to be as independent as they were before their vision loss. If they're born with blindness, then our goal is to work with the entire family so that the family understands what the capabilities are. Blindness may be an inconvenience. It may be something that one has to overcome, but it does not have to define your life. And it's something that we have so many techniques, devices, equipment that people can use. It's very important that parents and grandparents and siblings understand that the blind child, the blind baby or toddler, needs to be given the opportunity to learn, but they're going to learn differently. They're going to learn by touch. They're going to learn by sound. They're going to learn by experiencing. And sometimes parents are so worried that their child is going to get hurt that they hold them back. And for a blind child, having those experiences of touching and moving and getting to know what's around them is critically important to their development. So we teach the parents what they can do to both keep their child safe, but also give their child an opportunity to explore the world in a non-visual way.
All right, thank you. When you talk about parents being apprehensive about their children not, giving them new experiences, like in terms of touch, it's a natural instinct, isn't it? Parents not wanting the child to explore because of the disability. But what are the techniques that you use, and how long does it take for a parent to accept that this needs to be done? And how long does it take for the child also to truly understand the mode of communication?
So when a child is born without vision, they adapt very quickly because they don't know any different. They
Right.
begin to use their other senses, but we train the child and we train the parent so that they can use it most effectively and efficiently. For example, if you go into a very noisy, crowded room and you close your eyes, probably you will just hear a noisy, crowded room. But if you take a blind child that has been trained, they'll be able to isolate sounds. They'll be able to say to you, oh, somebody just came in the door. They'll hear that door opening and closing, or they'll hear a clock chime, or they'll be able to recognize a voice across the room. Many children actually can tell you how large the room is, not in exact feet, but they can say, oh, this is a very large room or this is a very small room, because they use a skill called echolocation. It's the same skill that bats have, that dolphins, that whales have, where you bounce the sound off of the things around you, and it gives you a sense of what your surroundings are like. Now, not everybody is good at it, but you can practice and you learn to listen to the sounds that come back to you. And some children are very, very good at it. You can go to YouTube and you can see blind people using echolocation as a way of navigating around unfamiliar areas, or both indoors and outdoors. So in addition to sensory development, teaching children how to use their other senses, we also expose them to as many activities that will help them develop those senses. So for example, with babies that are blind, we do a lot of work with sound, with touch, different textures, understanding what's safe, what's not safe. Sometimes it may be just changing the area that they're crawling on so they can tell the difference between a carpet or a floor. Those distinctions will be very important as they grow older. But as babies and toddlers, it's very important that they get this sense that the world is not all the same. Keeping them safe in a crib does not give them the opportunity to explore. Now, you still have to watch them. You have to make sure that they're not going to a stove that is hot. But otherwise, kids bang themselves and tumble and, get stuck in places, even when they're sighted. So those are the kinds of experiences that blind children need. Also, very often parents overprotect. So when the child is maybe a few feet away from a couch and the parent doesn't want to let them walk over because they're afraid they're going to fall, they have to give them that opportunity to walk. They can give them verbal directions. There are special canes that children can use to navigate their environment. There's a belt cane that actually fastens around the waist, and it has the cane attached to the toddler, and that keeps them from bumping into things. But it also gives them the opportunity to run, to be outside, to understand what a lawn is, what grass is. So those are the kinds of tools that we try to introduce early. For young children, we often encourage them to wear a hat with a brim, like a baseball cap, because that brim is both going to keep any sunlight out that might bother their eyes, but also it keeps them from knocking into something that is at their height of their forehead. It's a way of protecting them. So keeping that hat on that has a very hard brim it makes them less cautious, less injuries, and also it doesn't look funny. I mean, kids wear hats all the time.
True.
There are all kinds of tools and appliances and headwear that have been created for blind children. But we find that the children like to do what everybody else is doing. They like to look just like everybody else. So we try not to encourage them to use things that make them look funny, that they might get made fun of or bullied. But we introduce the tools that they need in order to be successful. Kids adapt very, very well, very, very quickly. The parents take longer. It can sometimes take months or even years for a parent to accept the fact that their child has this vision loss and is still going to be able to function and be successful. They've grown up with stereotypes and attitudes and negative feelings about disability. And it takes a very long time to change those attitudes and the stereotypes that people have learned. And that's part of our process is we work with that baby or toddler throughout their life. They come to us, they get trained, they wait a while, they develop, they start doing new things, they come back to us, they get trained, then they take a break, and we work with people from birth to death. So they can come back to us dozens of times as they grow and they develop and the skills they need to learn become more complicated. They come back to us.
Oh, wonderful. I was just going to ask you what is the age group? And you just said, right from birth to death, you have all age groups. Tell me, Nancy, you also spoke about technology. You spoke about these hats. You spoke about these little props and tools that help visually impaired individuals. Do you have any technology that you use, or are you looking for some kind of technology where more of assistance can be given to such individuals?
It's interesting that you asked that question because every week I get a student group that's trying to design the latest gadget for blind people. It seems to be an interest. High school students, college students, graduate students, they all want to try out their new device. And what we explain is that sometimes the simplest device or the simplest technique is the one that works the best. So everybody is trying to invent a better mobility cane. Well, the mobility cane that was invented in the 1960s, it's been tweaked a little bit. It's been made, a little bit stronger, a little bit more able to withstand the wear and tear. But it basically is the same cane that was created in the 1960s. And when I ask any of the 7,000 people that we serve every year, are you interested in trying out a new cane? They say, no, this cane works for me. It's inexpensive. it folds, or I can have one that doesn't fold. I can make it whatever color I need. I can change the tip. I can change the grip. Why would I want to invent something more complicated when this original invention actually works for me? So we often tell these inventors, even when they are high school students, talk to blind people first. Let them be involved in your invention, because as a sighted person, you may perceive something as a problem to be solved, but the blind person might say, the problem's already been solved, and I'm going to stick with what I know works. Unless you can produce something for me that is cheaper and works better, I am not likely to change what I'm using right now. And there are so many devices and gadgets. In fact, probably 50 different types of canes, electronic, canes that vibrate, canes that talk back to you, canes that have GPS in them. And very few people purchase them. They're too complicated. They don't give you enough new information beyond what the traditional standard mobility cane does. And so we teach people that standard mobility cane. If later in life they want to try something new, that's up to them. But often these devices are extremely expensive and they're not adopted because they don't solve the problem that the blind person has. They solve the problem that the sighted person thinks the blind person has. Other types of technology have really been game changers. So, for example, smartphones. When I first started working with blind people 50 years ago, we didn't have smartphones. So there weren't the opportunities that a smartphone offers to you now. You can download a GPS. You can download 100 different apps that are created specifically for blind people that, will help you read, will help you recognize, will help you take a picture, will read things out loud for you, will, connect you to a sighted volunteer. It's, the App Store just keeps being added to. Now that's something that blind people adopt new things all the time, because if there's an app that was created that makes it simpler or easier to function, and they're downloading an app just like a sighted person would. So many blind people will be using a whole variety of apps on their smartphone. They'll use the accessibility features. If they have some partial vision, if they're able to see a little bit, then they'll use magnification. If their vision is more impaired, they'll use speech. And it's all on your smartphone.
Yeah, that's a wonderful discovery indeed. Nancy, you spoke about people driving cars. Is that a thing? I mean, they really do?
Yes. So depending on the nature of your blindness, some people have what's called tunnel vision. So they only see like a small circle, maybe in the middle of their visual field, or it may be off to the side a little bit. Okay. They have optical aids that they can use that will help expand their visual field and make that little circle very, very, very clear. And when they're driving, they scan. They use that little part of their vision to scan the road. So their head may move more than ours, but they can actually be legally blind and still drive because of the optical aids that have been invented that enable them to see the visual field that they need to make sure that they can make turns, that they know when a car is turning.
Even a
And
signal,
those are techniques
even a
that,
red light.
yep, because they still have clear vision in a little piece of what they see, but they're
Wow,
considered
isn't that
legally
interesting?
blind.
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. But all this must be coming at a cost, right? It must be expensive to get these gizmos, if I could say.
So Visions pays for all of the devices and equipment and does not charge for any of the training. We can't buy the most expensive equipment. So we're not likely to buy somebody a computer, but we can buy them software. We can buy them something like an Alexa or an Echo that is voice activated. We can buy them talking watches. We can help them pay for the apps. Many things are available for free. So our role is to let them know what's out there. And then at the point at which they're out and they're working, they can decide what they want to buy for themselves. So our goal is really to introduce them to all of the options and the variety of what's out there. And we will purchase for them items that, maybe are under $100 or, altogether maybe $500 worth of equipment. If they are employment bound, if they are getting trained so that they hope to go into the workforce, in New York State, there's the New York State Commission for the Blind, and the commission will buy them whatever the equipment is that they need for the job. So there is a funding source. Every state has the equivalent of a commission for the blind. So in the United States, every blind person who is planning to go to work and who gets a job, the government will pay for the equipment that they need in order to get the job and keep the job. It may not be fancy. It may not be these electronic canes, but it'll be everything they'll need in order to be able to do the job that they've been hired for.
Lovely, lovely. Talking of employment, do these individuals have any sort of challenges in accepting or applying to places for employment?
Yes.
Is employment easy to come by?
Yeah, the biggest problem that blind people have in getting employed is the attitudes of the employers. Just like parents who have never experienced blindness before, they have a lot of misconceptions, a lot of stereotypes, a lot of negative feelings. Mm-hmm. Well, same with employers. They've been in a world that is not accepting of people with disabilities. Maybe they grew up and the disabled child that they knew was made fun of or bullied. It was a negative experience. So now they're an employer and they say, why would I want to hire a blind person? It's going to be more insurance. They're probably going to take off more time. They're going to be harder to train. Yes. It's exactly the opposite. Your insurance does not go up. Blind people with disabilities in general, have better attendance. They tend to stay at the job longer because it's harder to find work. And they end up being not only excellent employees, but Accenture has done research that shows if you hire people with disabilities, you actually become a more successful business. You get higher income, higher revenue. Your customers like you better. Your staff is more effective and efficient the more diverse it is. They come up with innovations. It's true whether or not you have staff of different ethnic backgrounds, staff that speak different languages. It's true of hiring people with disabilities. But most people don't know that. They don't get that information regularly. So we have to train them. We have to say, here's the evidence. Here's the research. We have people who will be great employees, not just good employees, great employees, but you got to give them a chance. And we will help you. We will adapt your environment so that this person is able to do the job that you need them to do. Even with that training, only 40% of blind people who want to work are actually employed. It's about half the sighted population. So we have a lot of work to do. We've made progress, but still many blind people who would like to work are not able to get a job. And so we keep trying, we keep training, we keep battling those discomforts. One of the good things that came out of the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, is that employers are hungry for staff right now. They're hungry for employees, especially if it's a job that you have to do in person. Many sighted people are opting for remote work. They want to work from home. Well, that's a great opportunity for somebody with a disability, because if they can do remote work, it saves them their commuting time. Often transportation is the biggest obstacle.
True, yeah.
But there are also employers where you have to go to work. The job requires you to be on site. And so there are opportunities now for blind people that didn't exist 3 years ago, because employers say, I need to get somebody to do that job. I guess I'll take a chance. They're hiring people with disabilities. They're hiring blind people. They're hiring people with criminal backgrounds. They're hiring new immigrants because they need the employees. And this is giving a chance. There's a little bit of an uptick in the number of blind people who are actually working now as compared to before the pandemic. Not a huge uptick, but more in the workforce now than before the pandemic. And that's a good sign.
Yeah, that's a good sign, really, indeed. And I would like to use this platform as well at CHEZUBA Talks. If any employer is listening to this, kindly employ visually challenged people. You will benefit. Your organization will benefit. And do you also, Nancy, go to corporates? Do you go to organizations and do you give a little brief talk about how, these people can be employed?
Yes. So we work a lot with organizations called chambers of commerce. These are groups of businesses that meet regularly, and various presentations are offered every month. So we offer presentations to all of these businesses. And we find the most effective is when we have a blind person who is working do the presentation. And often the employer doesn't even know that the presenter is blind until the very end of the presentation. And the person will say, and I'm blind, and they'll take out their mobility cane and everybody will gasp. They don't even realize it. It's getting away from the negative expectation and understanding that people who are blind have something to offer, that they are part of the solution. So we do presentations to the chambers of commerce. We do presentations to the aging network, people who work with older adults, because blindness is more common, more prevalent in the older population. And we want to make sure that they're included not only as employees and volunteers, but also if there are activities that are being offered, that they're accessible for people who are blind. We do about 1,000 presentations a year.
Wow, that's quite a number. That's great. Speaking of which, would you say that there are certain roles that are more suited to visually impaired individuals? Are there certain roles, job profiles, or certain roles which are more suited to
I can
blind people?
I can say that the jobs that people get are as diverse as the people we work with. We just trained a blind person to be an auto mechanic. We trained a blind person. He's now starting his apprenticeship as a heating, ventilation, air conditioning technician, HVAC. We've trained blind people to code, to do website development and testing.
That's
And then
interesting.
some of the traditional jobs, teacher aide, nurse's aide, vet assistant, any job that you can think of. Very, very, very few cannot be done by a blind person. We have people working in hospitals, universities, professors, and then we have people working in an Amazon warehouse, very entry level, more physical labor. But a lot of people who work in the back office, people who are doing customer service, resolving problems. We have a number of people who work in aviation, schedulers for airplanes, helping you make reservations, reservation agents. It really depends on what your interest
Very
is and
diverse.
passion.
Wonderful. It's very diverse. So
Yes.
there's nothing that they can't do. Is another myth that is expelled.
Yeah. I mean, occasionally we run into something that we haven't figured out how to adapt it yet, but it's very rare. And if that particular job is hard for a blind person to do, there's something very similar in the same field that they can do. So, we try to match the person's interest. We do a diagnostic evaluation to understand what are the things that they're really interested in. And then we try to match them with jobs that we know are hiring. It's one thing you might say, I want to be the Queen of England, but the likelihood of you getting that job is zero. So we try to help people. We get a lot of young people who want to be musicians, rock and roll musicians or rap stars. And we try to tell them, have a day job. And then your music career you can do on the side until you get discovered.
The younger generation is attracted by the glamour, I guess.
Yes, exactly. And, we try to keep it realistic. If you want music, that's great, but maybe train to be a music teacher, and then you can do, the other music on the side.
On the side, yes. Nancy, we spoke about the people who are visually impaired. Let's talk about the givers, the people who care for these people. Do you have any training, certification courses that anybody can do so that the family members or they can help and volunteer at organizations like yours?
So there are different ways that people can be involved. We train our volunteers. We have about 500 volunteers a year working in all our different locations. And we'll give them basic training, how to properly guide a person who is blind, which is basically you give them your arm and they hold you just above the elbow. So when you're guiding somebody, they're about a step behind you. And that's the safest way, not to hold their arm, not to pull them, not to push them. let them hold your arm. How much verbal description you give, you ask the person, how much would you like me to tell you of what's happening? So do you want me to tell you if we're going upstairs or downstairs or if there's a handrail? The person will let you know how much information they want. If they've been blind for a long time, just by your body movement, they'll be able to know exactly what's happening.
Yes.
So some people say, don't give me too much information. I'd rather have a conversation with you than you telling me everything that's coming up.
Right. Wonderful.
The professionals that we have, that we hire to work with people who are blind, have a master's degree. So they go to graduate school either to learn how to teach somebody how to manage in their own home, cooking, cleaning, childcare. That's a graduate degree in vision rehabilitation therapy. For somebody who wants to learn how to navigate outdoors, that's a graduate degree in mobility instruction. So our staff have graduate degrees, and then they get nationally certified, which says that they've been tested, that it's similar to a license where they've been tested and they follow a code of ethics where they're not going to try to teach something that they haven't learned how to teach. They know exactly what their scope of practice is. It's the same kind of protection that you get a doctor. If a doctor has been trained to do gynecology, they're not going to operate on your heart. They have certain licensure. So we try to get licensure in each state. In the United States, licensure is statewide, but certification is national. And it's a certifying body that gives you a test. And if you pass the test, then you can say you're certified. So all of the vision staff both have the master's degree and the certification. In addition, we have a brand new program for rehabilitation assistant. This is somebody that does not have the graduate degree, but wants to still work with people who are blind. And there's a college that is offering free of charge a training program. It takes about 10 months, but that person will be working directly with the blind person under the supervision of the professional. It's similar to a physician assistant works with a doctor, or a nurse's assistant works with the nurse. The doctor, the nurse, the rehabilitation professional oversees the assistant, but the assistant is available for practice, for reinforcement. So the rehab professional may introduce a skill. Say the person wants to learn how to get from the entrance of their apartment to the mailbox. So the professional will teach it, but then the assistant will practice and make sure that the blind person is using the safe technique. And then the professional will come back when the assistant says, I think they've learned it, they've incorporated it, they're doing it right. The professional comes back and says, okay, I now have viewed that you are able to do it, and I can close that skill training and say that you've been successful. So having assistance, we find, is very helpful because there's a shortage of the professionals. And having assistance means that we can work with more people more intensively.
Yes, wonderful. Yes. Nancy, is there any way people can come and see the work that you're doing at your organization, or is it restricted entry?
People absolutely are welcome to come to our older adult center. It's in Manhattan, in New York City, on 23rd Street. It's open by appointment for observations. We often ask people who want to volunteer to come and observe first so that they understand how the center is set up, what their role would be, being around blind people who may also be wheelchair users, who may have other disabilities, people who might use crutches, might use walkers, other mobility devices, in addition to their blindness. We want to make sure that they feel comfortable in the environment.
Yes.
We also have some YouTube videos from Visions that give you some idea of the services we provide. And for people who are interested in becoming rehab professionals, we invite them to come and observe a lesson so they understand exactly what the rehabilitation professional does.
All right. Yes. Wonderful. So here's telling everybody who's listening and watching this, people who are blind will graduate from college, they will work, they'll raise families, they play sports, they do everything that a full-sighted person can do. They just do it differently, using non-visual methods and techniques. Nancy, I cannot express how deeply touched I am by the work you do. I hope that you get all the support and resources you need in abundance. Thank you so much for sharing all this information.
Well, thank you. And we invite people to visit our website, www.visionsvcb.org. The VCB stands for Vision Center on Blindness, which is our short-term residential rehab center, which is located just north of New York City. So Visions with an S, V as in Victor, C as in cat, B as in boy.org. Come and visit our website, learn about the work that we do, and if it's possible, make a donation. We rely on the donor community so that we can keep all of our services completely free of charge.
Wonderful. Thank you so very much, Nancy. You have a great day.
Thank you. You too.